My name is Alara, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been a study in quiet resilience. I live in Port Blossom, a city that clings to the coast, perpetually draped in a soft veil of mist and smelling of damp earth and salt. It's a place of subtle beauty, where the gray skies make the burst of cherry blossoms in spring feel like a miracle. I am 34 years old. My world, my entire universe, is contained within the lives of my 3 children, Maya, who at 9 possesses an old soul's perception, Leo, my gentle 7-year-old son whose heart is as open as the sea, and little Lily, who is just 2, a whirlwind of giggles and toddling curiosity, a promise of new beginnings. They are the anchors that hold me to this earth, the reason I navigate the currents of my life as a single mother. I work 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to keep our small boat afloat. By day, the aroma of roasted coffee and steamed milk at the Evergreen Cafe clings to my clothes. In the afternoons, I find a different kind of peace stocking shelves at a quiet local bookstore, the scent of paper and ink a welcome balm. Our life is a tapestry woven with threads of scarcity and abundance, scarce in funds, but abundant in love. We have our rituals, story time huddled on our lumpy sofa, weekend walks along the pebbled shoreline, and dance parties in the living room that leave us breathless with laughter. It is a life I built from wreckage, a sanctuary I guard with every fiber of my being. The wreckage was my marriage to Julian. We met in our mid-20s, 2 hopeful people who believed love was enough. He was charming, with a laugh that could fill a room and a way of looking at me that made me feel like the only person in the world. We married a year after we met, and for a time, it was good. Maya and then Leo arrived, and our little apartment felt full of light. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, the light began to dim. Julian grew distant, his laughter becoming a rare commodity, his gaze often fixed on something far beyond our living room walls. The end came with a cruelty I could never have anticipated. I was pregnant with Lily, my body weary but my heart full of hope for this new life. I came home from a doctor's appointment early one winter afternoon, the air sharp with cold. I found Maya and Leo huddled on the front steps of our own home, their small faces pinched with confusion and cold. Maya's coat was too thin, and Leo was shivering, his hands tucked into his armpits. "Daddy's friend is here," Maya whispered, her eyes wide. "He said we had to wait outside." A cold dread, far more chilling than the winter air, seeped into my bones. Through the window, I could see them, Julian and a woman I didn't know, laughing together on our sofa. He had locked his own children out of their home in the dead of winter to entertain his mistress. The betrayal was not just of me, but of them. It was a sin I could not forgive. The foundation of our family cracked and crumbled in that single, frozen moment. The divorce was swift. Julian, eager to be free, signed the papers without contest. He also, without a flicker of remorse, abdicated all financial responsibility. The house was his inheritance, so with a newborn Lily in my arms and 2 bewildered children at my side, I had to leave. He and his new partner vanished, leaving behind nothing but a chasm of broken promises. The weight of it all was immense. The stress and heartache took a toll on my health, and I lost the full-time administrative job I'd held. But as I looked at my children's faces, I knew despair was a luxury I could not afford. I found the part-time jobs, pieced together a fragile income, and relied on the kindness of a friend whose older sister would watch the children for whatever I could pay her. We survived. More than that, in our small, second-floor apartment overlooking a perpetually damp courtyard, we began to heal. We created our own light, our own warmth. For 2 years, we lived in this quiet, protected peace. And then, the past came calling. It started with a phone number I didn't recognize. It would flash on my screen multiple times a day, a persistent, silent demand for my attention. I ignored it, assuming it was just another telemarketer. In my life, unexpected calls rarely brought good news. I was a master of avoidance, skilled in the art of letting things ring until they fell silent. One rainy Tuesday, while stocking children's books, a voice from behind me sliced through the quiet hum of the bookstore. "Well, look at you. Still playing make-believe." I turned, my heart giving a painful lurch. It was my sister, Clara. She stood there, impeccably dressed in a tailored coat that probably cost more than my month's rent, a smug, familiar smile playing on her lips. She looked me up and down, her gaze cataloguing my worn jeans and faded apron with disdain. The years had not softened her. "Clara," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I managed a tight, brittle smile. "What are you doing here? How did you find me?" "Oh, a private detective," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "It wasn't cheap, but Mother insisted. She's been trying to call you. You really should answer your phone, Alara." Her casual mention of money, of hiring someone to hunt me down, sent a chill through me. My relationship with my mother, Eleanor, and my sister was not one of fond absence. It was a carefully constructed wall, built brick by painful brick over a lifetime of being made to feel less than. I was the quiet, overlooked daughter, Clara was the brilliant, favored one. Our childhood home was not a place of warmth for me, but a stage for Clara's triumphs and my inadequacies. I had not spoken to either of them since before my divorce, a silence I had cultivated and cherished. "I've been busy," I said, turning back to the bookshelf, a physical shield against her presence. "I can see that," she said, the condescension dripping from her tone. "Listen, Mother wants to talk. We'll be at the diner on the corner in an hour. Be there." It wasn't a request, it was a summons. Later that night, after tucking my children into bed, their soft, even breaths the only sound in our little apartment, I felt the old anxieties creeping back in. I didn't go to the diner. Instead, consumed by a grim curiosity, I finally called the number that had been plaguing me. Clara answered on the first ring. "It's about time," she snapped, foregoing any greeting. We waited for an hour. "I told you, I'm busy, Clara. I have children to take care of." A sharp, cruel laugh echoed down the line. "Oh, right. The brood. Honestly, Alara, who would even marry you in the first place? And to have 3? You never did know when to stop." The words were like tiny, poison darts, striking at the most vulnerable parts of my heart. The life I had so painstakingly built, the children who were my reason for breathing, she spoke of them as if they were a stain, a mistake. "My life is not your concern," I said, my voice shaking with a fury I hadn't felt in years. "Don't call me again." I hung up and, with a trembling finger, blocked her number. The silence that followed was a relief, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The wall I had built around my peaceful life had been breached, and I had a terrible feeling that this was only the beginning. A few weeks passed in a state of tense quiet. I jumped every time the phone rang, scanned the street for Clara's polished car every time I left the apartment. But there was nothing. I started to breathe a little easier, convincing myself it was a passing storm. I confided in my friend Simone over coffee, her pragmatic anger a comforting counterpoint to my own roiling emotions. "Let them go, Elle," she said, her hand covering mine. "You don't owe them anything. They were never there for you. Why should you be there for them now?" Simone was right. She had known me since high school, had witnessed the casual cruelties, the way Eleanor's eyes would light up for Clara while sliding right past me. Simone's family had been a haven for me then, a place of warmth and easy acceptance that I had craved in my own home. One crisp autumn morning, the familiar rumble of a moving truck outside my window shattered my fragile peace. I peered through the blinds, my heart sinking into my stomach. There, on the curb, directing the movers with an air of regal authority, was my mother, Eleanor. And beside her, a triumphant smirk on her face, was Clara. They were moving into the apartment directly across the hall. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence, it was an invasion. I hadn't seen my mother in almost 5 years, but her expression was unchanged, a mixture of disapproval and long-suffering martyrdom that she had perfected over decades. She saw me in the window and her lips thinned into a familiar sneer. Later, when I couldn't avoid them any longer, I stepped into the hallway to take out the trash. They were waiting for me, as if they'd been lying in wait. "So, this is where you've been hiding," Eleanor began, her voice raspy but strong. "I heard your husband finally saw sense and left you. Can't say I'm surprised. You and your little brood, like a flock of drab little sparrows. You can't turn a sparrow into a swan, no matter how hard you try." The casual venom of her words stole my breath. I felt myself shrink, the insecure teenager re-emerging from beneath the capable mother I had become. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice tight. "Because you blocked our calls," Clara interjected, stepping forward. "Mother isn't well. Her arthritis is getting worse. She needs to be near family. She needs someone to take care of her." The audacity of it was staggering. A mother who had been a ghost in my life, who had offered no comfort, no support, no love when my world fell apart, now demanded I become her caretaker. The injustice of it ignited a spark of anger deep within me. "You have got to be kidding me," I said, my hands balling into fists. "You want me to take care of her? Where were you when Julian left? Where were you when I was struggling to feed my children? Where have you been for my entire life?" Clara grabbed my arm. "Don't be so dramatic. She's your mother. It's your duty." I wrenched my arm away. "Don't touch me." I backed into my apartment, the sanctuary they had now violated, and slammed the door, turning the deadbolt with a loud, final click. I leaned against the wood, listening to their muffled, angry voices in the hall, my heart hammering against my ribs. From the living room, I heard Leo's small voice. "Mommy? Are you okay?" I pushed away from the door and walked to him, scooping him into my arms. Lily toddled over, wrapping her arms around my leg. Maya watched from the doorway, her dark eyes full of worry. I forced a smile, a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. "I'm fine, my loves. Mommy's fine. And I will always, always protect you." As I held them close, I knew this was a war I couldn't afford to lose. The days that followed were a form of psychological siege. My home was no longer a sanctuary but a fortress with enemies camped just across the landing. Their presence was a constant, oppressive weight. Eleanor and Clara operated as a pincer movement, designed to wear me down. In the mornings, as I herded my children out the door for school and daycare, Eleanor would be conveniently leaving her apartment as well. "Oh, Alara, darling," she'd call out, her voice syrupy sweet, a stark contrast to the venom she'd spat at me just days before. "Since you're going out anyway, could you possibly drop me at my doctor's appointment? My hip is just flaring up something terrible today." The first time, caught off guard and with the children watching, I agreed. The car ride was a masterclass in manipulation. She sighed heavily, catalogued her aches and pains, and spoke of the rising cost of her prescriptions, her eyes flicking to me in the rearview mirror, planting the seeds of expectation. I dropped her off and drove away feeling used, my jaw clenched so tightly it ached. It became a pattern. Demands for rides. Requests to pick up groceries. Insistence that I handle her bills. Clara's husband, Marcus, a man with a perpetual sneer who seemed to share his wife's sense of entitlement, would occasionally join the fray. He'd see me in the hallway and make comments just loud enough to hear. Some people have no respect for their elders. No sense of family duty. One evening, I returned from my shift at the bookstore, my body aching with fatigue, to find them waiting for me outside my door. "We need to talk," Clara said, blocking my path. "I'm tired, Clara. I need to make dinner for my kids." "This is important," Eleanor insisted, leaning dramatically against the wall. "The doctor says I might need surgery on my knee. A cartilage repair. It's going to be very expensive." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. They expected me to pay. Me, the woman working 2 jobs to keep food on the table for her 3 children. Me, the woman who hadn't bought herself a new coat in 4 years. The sheer, unadulterated gall of it sent a hot rush of fury through me. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it felt like a thunderclap in the stuffy hallway. Clara's eyes narrowed. "No? What do you mean, no? She's our mother. She raised you. Did she?" The question slipped out, full of a lifetime of hurt. Did she really? I thought of my childhood, a landscape of benign neglect. I remembered wearing Clara's outgrown clothes, not as a charming hand-me-down, but because new clothes were an indulgence reserved for the favored child. I remembered parent-teacher conferences where my mother never showed, music recitals where my chair in the audience was always empty. She was there for Clara's piano competitions, for her debate team victories, for her graduation, beaming with pride. My own high school graduation was a lonely affair. I'd worked a part-time job through my junior and senior years to pay for my own class ring and yearbook, my own cap and gown. My guidance counselor, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable, was the one who encouraged me, who told me my grades were good enough for a state university. But when I'd broached the subject of college with my mother, she had waved a dismissive hand. "College is for people like Clara. You should find a sensible job, Elara. Be realistic." Her refusal to even consider helping with tuition was the final, closing door on that dream. I left home a week after graduation, not with a sense of adventure, but with a desperate need to escape the suffocating weight of her indifference. All these memories swirled in my head as I stood in the hallway, the smell of my mother's expensive, cloying perfume filling my nostrils. "I took care of you when you were a child," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "I put a roof over your head." "You provided the bare minimum, Mother," I said, my voice gaining strength. "You gave Clara the world. You gave me her leftovers. You have a part-time job. Clara has a good job. You have savings. You can pay for your own surgery." I pushed past them, unlocked my door, and stepped inside, the sounds of my children's cartoons a welcome shield. But their shouting followed me through the wood. "You ungrateful child. How dare you? You'll regret this." The harassment escalated. They would knock on my door at all hours. One night, they were so loud, shouting about my selfishness, that a neighbor finally called the police. The two young officers who arrived looked tired and unimpressed. They listened to Eleanor's tearful, exaggerated tale of woe and Clara's indignant accusations. Then they looked at me, standing in my doorway, exhausted and pale. "Ma'am," one of the officers said to my mother, his tone firm but polite. "You can't keep harassing your daughter like this. If she doesn't want to engage, you need to respect that. This is your only warning." They left, and for a few days, there was silence. A fragile, temporary truce. But I knew it was just the calm before the next storm. The tipping point was coming. I could feel it building, a pressure in my chest that had nowhere to go. It happened on a Friday. Eleanor had an appointment for a preoperative consultation at Harborview Medical Center across town. True to form, she demanded I take her. I refused. I had to work, I told her, a valid excuse that was also a boundary. She and Clara unleashed a volley of guilt and recrimination, but I held firm. Later that afternoon, I received a frantic call from Clara. Mother fell getting out of the taxi at the hospital. She broke her leg, Elara. Her leg. "This is your fault. You have to come here right now and you have to deal with this." A wave of nausea washed over me. Guilt, sharp and reflexive, pierced through my resolve. But then another thought followed, cold and clear. It wasn't my fault. I was not responsible for her choices, for her life. Still, the pull of duty, ingrained since childhood, was strong. I told my boss at the cafe I had a family emergency, picked up the kids, and drove to the hospital. I found them in the emergency room waiting area. Eleanor was in a wheelchair, her leg in a temporary cast, her face a mask of tragedy. Clara was pacing, her phone pressed to her ear. When she saw me, she hung up and stormed over. There you are. They're saying she needs surgery. Pins and a plate. We have to handle the insurance, the billing. I walked over to the admissions desk, my mind a numb haze. The clerk handed me a clipboard of forms. I stood there, pen hovering over the line for responsible party. I saw my name, Elara Vance, and my hand started to shake. Flashes of the past assaulted me, at 7, with a fever, being told by my mother to just go lie down because she was busy getting Clara ready for a birthday party. Me, at 16, begging for a ride to a job interview, only to be told the car was for Clara's driving practice. Me, a new mother, desperate and alone, with no one to call. And now they wanted this. They wanted my time, my energy, my money, my signature on a line that would bind me to their chaos. I looked over at my children, huddled together on a hard plastic chair. Maya was reading a book to Leo and Lily, her small voice a beacon of calm in the sterile, anxious room. They were my responsibility. They were my family. Not these two women who had only ever brought me pain. Something inside me shifted. A quiet, tectonic plate of self-worth sliding into place. I set the clipboard and the pen down on the counter. I turned around and walked towards the exit, my steps feeling strangely light. Elara? Where are you going? Clara's voice was sharp with disbelief. I didn't turn around. Elara. Get back here. You can't just leave us. Eleanor's shriek echoed in the cavernous waiting room. I kept walking. I pushed open the glass doors and stepped out into the cool, evening air. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of rain and exhaust filling my lungs. It was the first breath of freedom I had taken in a very long time. I gathered my children, buckled them into their car seats, and drove away, ignoring the frantic, buzzing demands of my phone. When I got home, the storm broke in full force. Clara must have gotten a ride, because she was there, waiting in the hallway, her face contorted with rage. She began yelling before I even had the door open, her words a torrent of blame. I shielded my children, pushing them gently inside ahead of me. This isn't about them, I said, turning to face her in the doorway. Mother has her own money. You have your own money. She can manage her own bills. Just then, the door to their apartment opened and Eleanor hobbled out on a pair of hospital-issued crutches, her face a thundercloud. You are a disgrace, she spat, her voice shaking with fury. I am ashamed to call you my daughter. I disown you. Do you hear me? You are no longer part of this family. Clara smirked, a cruel, triumphant glint in her eyes. This is what you get, Elara, she taunted, her voice low and vicious. This is what you get for not educating yourself, for making a mess of your life. Don't you ever come crawling back to us for anything. They exchanged a look, a quick, conspiratorial chuckle passing between them. A strange and sudden calm washed over me. Their words, meant to be the final, killing blow, were instead a key turning a lock. They had disowned me. They had set me free. Relief, pure and exhilarating, flooded my veins. Fine, I said, my voice steady. I met their shocked expressions with a resolve that felt brand new. But you'll regret this. They looked at each other, a flicker of surprise in their eyes, before their dismissive smirks returned. Do what you want, Clara said with a shrug. It makes no difference to us whether you're here or not. I gathered my children, who were watching from the living room, their eyes wide and close to tears. I knelt down in front of them. Listen to me, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion but unwavering. We're leaving. We're leaving tonight. You have all been so brave, so strong. I need you to be strong for a little while longer. Go to your rooms, pack your most important things into your backpacks. Be very, very quiet. We're going on an adventure. Maya's eyes, so like my own, filled with understanding. She nodded, taking Leo and Lily by the hand. As they went to their room, a single tear escaped my eye, not of sadness, but of profound, earth-shattering relief. The siege was over. We were escaping. The plan had been forming in my subconscious for weeks, a desperate whisper that grew louder with each new demand, each fresh insult. It was a half-formed dream of escape, one I hadn't dared believe possible due to the crushing realities of money and logistics. But the confrontation in the hallway was not a breaking point, it was a catalyst. It burned away the fog of doubt and obligation, leaving only a clear, determined path forward. For months, I had been squirreling away every spare dollar. A $5 bill from a generous tip at the cafe, $10 saved by choosing the generic brand of pasta, the small refund from an overpaid utility bill. It wasn't much, but it was a secret seed of hope I had been nurturing in a forgotten corner of my heart. A week before the hospital incident, a miracle had occurred. An old acquaintance from high school, now a property manager, had posted online about a small, two-bedroom apartment becoming available in a different district, a quiet, leafy neighborhood on the other side of Port Blossom. The rent was affordable, almost impossibly so. On a whim, fueled by a desperate premonition, I had called her. I explained my situation, the bare bones of it, and she had listened with a sympathy that felt like a balm. "It's yours if you want it, Elara," she'd said. "The landlord is an older gentleman who values quiet, stable tenants over maximizing profit. I can hold it for you for a week." At the time, I wasn't sure I could make it happen. Now, there was no other choice. We moved like ghosts in the quiet of our own home. I waited until I saw Clara's car pull out of the parking lot. She worked a night shift as a retail manager and knew her husband, Marcus, would be engrossed in television. Eleanor, sedated with pain medication, would be asleep. This was our window. The children were magnificent. They moved with a hushed seriousness, their small backpacks filled with stuffed animals, favorite books, and carefully chosen treasures. Maya organized them like a tiny general, whispering instructions. Leo, though his lower lip trembled, packed his rock collection with solemn care. Even little Lily seemed to understand, patting her worn teddy bear and shushing him. We packed the essentials: clothes, bedding, the box of photo albums, the children's artwork from the fridge, the dented saucepan I used for everything. Each item we carried down the 2 flights of stairs to my old, sputtering sedan felt like a small victory. The car sagged under the weight of our life, but it felt strong, reliable. We worked in a silent, synchronized dance, our movements fueled by adrenaline and a shared, unspoken purpose. By 11 p.m., the apartment was eerily empty, stripped of the warmth and personality we had given it. It was just a shell, holding the echoes of our laughter and our struggles. I took one last look around, a pang of sadness mixed with overwhelming relief. I left the key on the counter and gently closed the door behind us for the last time. Driving away from that building in the dark, the streetlights painting fleeting stripes of gold across my sleeping children's faces, was one of the most profound moments of my life. The rain had started again, a gentle, cleansing rhythm on the windshield. Each mile we put between us and that place felt like a layer of old, dirty skin being sloughed away. We were not just moving across town, we were moving into a new existence. We arrived at our new home just after midnight. It was on the top floor of a quiet, 3-story brick building. The air smelled of damp leaves and chimney smoke. Inside, the apartment was small and simple, with scuffed hardwood floors and large windows that looked out into the branches of a massive oak tree. It was empty, clean, and blessedly, peacefully silent. It was ours. We laid our bedding on the floor of the living room and collapsed in a heap, falling asleep instantly, a small, exhausted family, finally safe in our new harbor. The next morning, my phone was a disaster zone. A dozen missed calls from Clara. A string of increasingly frantic text messages. "Where are you? Mother needs her prescription. This isn't funny, Elara. Answer your phone. Did you seriously just abandon everything? You will pay for this. I will find you." I read them not with fear, but with a detached sense of confirmation. Their panic wasn't born of concern for my welfare, It was the panic of people who had just lost their scapegoat, their unpaid servant. They had depended on me far more than they would ever admit, and now, they were adrift. I turned the phone off and put it in a drawer. A week later, once we had settled in and I had enrolled the children in their new neighborhood school, I bought a cheap, pay-as-you-go phone. I allowed myself one final call. I dialed Clara's number. She answered with a snarl. "Where in God's name are you? Do you have any idea the trouble you've caused?" "Listen carefully, Clara," I said, my voice calm and even, a tone I had never used with her before. "We are safe and we are fine. I will not be helping you or Mother with anything. Not with money, not with care, not with anything at all. Our relationship, whatever was left of it, is over. Do not try to find me." "You can't do this," she shrieked. "What about Mother? Who is going to?" I hung up. Then, I texted her the number for a senior home care agency. It was my one and only concession. I blocked her number from my new phone and felt the final chain break. As life began to find its new, gentle rhythm, a different kind of call came. It was my father. He and my mother had divorced when I was a teenager, a bitter separation that had left him distant and, in many ways, an enigma to me. He'd heard through the family grapevine that I had disappeared. "Ilara," his voice was hesitant, full of a gravelly regret. "Are you all right, kiddo? Your aunt told me what's been going on." Tears sprang to my eyes. For the first time, I told him everything. The years of neglect, the demands, the cruelty, the final escape. He listened without interruption, his silence a comforting presence. "I'm so sorry, Ilara," he said when I finished, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry I wasn't there to protect you from her. I should have done more. I let you down." His apology was a key to a room in my heart I didn't even know was locked. It was the beginning of a slow, cautious healing. He offered to help, to send money, to be a grandfather to the children he barely knew. For the first time, I allowed myself to accept help, not as a handout, but as a gesture of love. One afternoon, Maya came home from school looking troubled. She told me she'd overheard her cousin, Clara's daughter, Olivia, talking to a friend on the playground a few months back, before we'd moved. She said Auntie Clara was sad because her boss was always mad at her, Maya recounted. And that she had to fix the numbers to make him happy. The innocent phrase, "fix the numbers," landed with a heavy thud in my gut. It connected with whispers I'd heard from a distant cousin who worked in the same retail chain, rumors of inventory discrepancies and missing deposits at Clara's store. At the time, I'd dismissed it as gossip. Now, it clicked into place with terrifying clarity. My sister, the golden child, the one who looked down on my simple life, was likely an embezzler. Her desperation to have me take on the full-time care of our mother wasn't just about entitlement, it was about freeing up her own time and resources to manage a crisis she had created. The panic in her messages wasn't just anger, it was the terror of being caught. With a heavy heart, I made an anonymous call to the corporate head office of her company. I told them what I had heard, suggesting they look closely at the financials of the Port Blossom branch. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because her chaotic, dishonest life could no longer be allowed to threaten the peace of mine. A few months later, I agreed to meet my father for lunch. He looked older, his face etched with worry, but his eyes were kind. He told me the news he had heard through the family. Clara had been fired. An investigation had uncovered that she had been stealing from the company for over a year, skimming cash and manipulating inventory records. She was facing criminal charges. Marcus, her husband, who believed her large salary was their primary source of income, was blindsided and furious. Their marriage was imploding. And my mother, Eleanor, was now completely alone. Stripped of her favored daughter's financial support and faced with her public disgrace, she had been forced to sell her jewelry and tap into her retirement funds to hire legal help for Clara. Her world, built on a foundation of pride and favoritism, had crumbled. Leaving the restaurant that day, I felt not a shred of triumph, but a profound and somber sense of relief. It was the closing of a painful, dark chapter. When I got home, my apartment was filled with the warm, buttery smell of cookies. Maya and Leo were at the kitchen table, frosting them with colorful icing while Lily clapped her hands, her face smeared with chocolate. The late afternoon sun streamed through the large window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, golden fairies. The peace in that room was so pure, so complete, it brought tears to my eyes. This was my life. This was my victory. Not their downfall, but our quiet, joyful survival. My father became a regular presence in our lives. He would take the children to the park, telling them stories about his time as a fisherman, his voice full of the wisdom of the tides. He was making up for lost time, and his love was a gentle rain on the dry soil of our family's past. I found a new job at the local library, a place of quiet and stories, where my work was appreciated and I was treated with respect. Day by day, we were building a life of peace. Each morning I watched my children walk to school, my heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. They were safe. They were happy. They were free to become whoever they were meant to be, unburdened by the shadows that had once haunted me. I still live in Port Blossom, the city of mist and miracles. I am still Alara. But I am not the same woman who stood trembling in a hospital corridor. I learned that boundaries are not walls to keep others out, but fences to protect the sacred garden of the self. I learned that family is not always a matter of blood, but of who shows up when the storm hits. And I learned that true strength isn't about weathering the abuse, but having the courage to walk away from it, into the cleansing rain, towards a life of your own making. We were finally free, and in giving my children that freedom, I had finally, truly, found my own.